Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode on Twitter Revolutions, which is brought to you by Alexis, Journal of International Affairs. Today, we are going to discuss about what a Twitter revolution is, and eventually, I'll be leaving you with a parting thought. So let's start with what exactly this is in a very simplistic manner so that it's not very heavy for you. But let us understand that it is beyond the complications and contours of these topics are beyond what I'm specifying in a time limit of 8 to 10 minutes, right? So let's start with the entire idea of what a Twitter revolution is, or what are Twitter revolutions if you use it in terms of plural. So before that, you have to understand what a revolution is, obviously. So if you study Hannah Arendt, who, as you can see, was a German-born American political philosopher, right? She wrote this book in 1963, as you can see on the left side, called as On Revolution, in which she said that we often, when we think about revolution, the first thing that comes into our mind is, oh, the French Revolution of 1789. But we often bypass and subconsciously or unintentionally do not remember the American Revolution, something that we need to remember more now. But the point which I'm trying to say is that she believed that the French Revolution got much more merit than the American Revolution, A. And B, she gave this entire paradigm of what a revolution is. So there's a difference between a demonstration, uprising, remonstration as a part of social movement than a revolution. Not everything is a revolution. Not every uprising or demonstration is a revolution, right? In revolution, so what is so different about it? What is very different about it is that the entire structure of the political system or the discourse or political pluralism changes. So if it is a military authoritarianship, it becomes into a democracy. If it is a democracy, free dictatorship, whatever, like, in different ways. But the point which I'm trying to say is that if you look back and think about what would Hannah would have said about Twitter revolution, she would have said it's an uprising and not a revolution. So let's see why. So what happens is, why we have to figure out is, in 2010, 17th or 18th of December, 10 years from now, sorry, Mohammad Bouazizi was a 25, 26-year-old Tunisian street vendor who used to sell fruits, vegetables in Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia. And he was often hassled by the policemen, he didn't have the permit, and many other things, right? So one day what happens is that he's hassled on 17th of December or 18th of December. He's hassled again. He's slapped by a female policewoman, which goes against his entire moral compass, what he was taught in patriarchal network, if you want to see it in that way. But that is a point of view, might not be real. And he was also very agonized that, look, I am the breadwinner of the family, bread earner of the family. I'm not able to make ends meet. And this is because of the government, which is so corrupt in Tunisia. And we have to, he self-immolated himself, set himself on fire. So what happened was that in Islam, self-immolation is sin. But what happened is that, imagine what would be the pain of that person who went ahead and did this to himself. And this galvanized what we today call as Arab uprising, starting from Egypt, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, many other countries, right? Now, 10 years from now, when you look at it, it seems less intense, but that point of time, it was massive and surreal because it was never seen in that particular trajectory, in that particular capacity, it was not seen. And what was causing people to come together? Millions of people at Tahrir Square in Cairo, or millions of people coming together even in Bahrain, which is having a media blackout regarding whatever happened in the uprising over there. What happened was that people were coming together and they were involved in assembling, protesting in a very spiritual way, if you ask. So I've been to Egypt and I've asked all these revolutionaries about how they felt during that period of time. And it was completely which you cannot define in words. This solidarity that came. So these uprisings were called as Twitter and Facebook revolutions because it was only through social media that people were able to come together and protest. So understand, is it right to call it, or is it too quick? Or we have this tendency to put things into boxes and brackets, and that's why we do it. But the point is that Was it right? So why was Twitter used? See, there was a difference in the mechanism. Facebook was used and tell you that this is happening, a protest is going to happen, and we have to galvanize and assemble and all of that. Twitter was used when you're once there on the ground. So you're at Tahrir Square and now you have to meet and click and figure out what's happening. So you use Twitter. So everything. So it was the pre-planning was through Facebook, and the immediate real-time feed of Twitter was used. And this helped a lot of people to come together. So what is the advantage and the disadvantage of it? If we go ahead and stick with the idea that, say, it can be a revolution because it was the first time technology was used in creating this kind of changes. But the question again is that what happened? How does it appear after 10 years, right? But nevertheless, we will understand both the sides of this question of whether the term Twitter revolution or Facebook revolution is right, or what is the disadvantage of using it. So for the first thing that comes into my mind is that, see, Twitter, Facebook give you the idea that you can be a citizen journalist, or you are not dependent on a traditional media outlet for news. You can become your own trustworthy source. You can, if something is happening in your country, you can tweet and people will come to know about it. So there's a certain kind of transparency which is there. You can assemble and organize, you can create, you can see the intensity of all these protests that went around, right? And there's no ownership. So if there is ownership of a media, then there's a particular ideology which is involved with the funding of it. But here you own yourself, I believe. So you can go ahead and tweet or Facebook posts and everything, which you think is how your story of what you are looking around your life and in your world should be portrayed as. These are 4 points. The points which are against is, so if you can use it, the government can use it too, the dictator can use it too. It can cause massive surveillance. You know that whichever social media or internet generated apps, or not exactly the algorithm, but the way they have been planned and assembled, every particular app, website stores some kind of data from your, input. That is the entire model of the internet and social media. So, how private is your reality? Second, if, for example, there is something that you want to report, but it might cause some kind of negative impact on your life, what is the safety? Even the dictators or your government or the head of your, military regimes can use it for surveillance and for propaganda. And there's a lot of ambiguity. You don't know if it is authentic. So for example, if something is suddenly you see in Iraq as, I'm just giving an example. If you see some kind of war or violence in Iraq, it might be that this is a video dating back to 2020, right? Just giving a discourse to it. And it sets us in a virtual bubble. So all of this, understand that social media, the kind of patterns that you have of checking profiles and news outlets and journalists and others is the kind of algorithm which Twitter and Facebook have realized that this is what you want to see, and that is your feed. It puts you in a bubble because you will always have those kinds of news which you are aware in terms of your ideology and not the opposing ones because you don't follow them. So it's a certain kind of a bubble. But then again, it's the same. The social media or Twitter revolutions debate is just as, the debate over science and technology, that science is a very good servant, but a bad master. So it is all different from context to context. So I will part today with the question that who pays the price? So we all over the world can easily go ahead and name phenomena, episodes of, moments in history. But who eventually pays the price? And who deserves to call it that way, right? So who pays the price? For that, if you want to figure out, was it a revolution or not? The right person to ask is a Tunisian, an Egyptian, a Bahraini, a Syrian, a Libyan, right? Why I want to say this? Because that is how we all need to understand that this is the context in which we are using it. The same kind of paradigm will not be equally applicable when you talk about, say, for example, UK or US. So understand that the concept of Twitter revolutions or Facebook revolutions came forward with the Arab uprising mostly becoming a very colloquial form of nomenclature. So I hope that today's first episode was good, and we'll come again back next week with another topic, and you can suggest if you want anything. Thank you so much for listening and hearing and watching. Have a good week. Thank you.